Well, Scranton was a boom town, and it was really pretty much a created city by a group of entrepreneurs who really made Scranton a sort of focus of the Lackawanna Valley, and ultimately with enough power to separate the Lackawanna Valley from the Luzerne Valley. There were a number of very entrepreneurial men, for the most part, who really created dynasties here and left a legacy. It's kind of funny, Scranton has received a lot of attention lately, and it's all blue collar, blue collar, blue collar, but Scranton was built as a cultural center, economic center, and so it always had people who were educated and people who planned the community and sought to bring and build the best here. So it's part of why we have some of the great buildings that we have. The period between, let's say, 1870 and 1930, the architectural style is considered to be architecturally eclectic. There were dominant themes, and there were certain people who were classicists and some who were gothicists, and some of it had to do with the preference of the architect, some of it had to do with the preference of the client. Frequently, clients would like to express their sort of ethnic origins in their construction. They'd want a building to appear to be British, or to perhaps have certain classical or Italian leanings, or such and such. And so part of it comes from that, but also it was the dominant trend at the time. It wasn't until really after the war, when sort of international style, modernism, the sort of universal kind of style took over, and that sort of eclecticism ended. Well, the entrepreneurs, the business people of the time, the people who built this city, were very clearly interested in displaying their prosperity and their success in their homes, in their religious structures, in their civic buildings and offices and that kind of thing. So there's a great manifestation of their wealth and success that we live with today. When the Scranton estate was built in the 1870s, it was considered to be one of the most remarkable structures in Pennsylvania. And in the sort of Victorian tradition of the miller mine owner being able to sort of oversee the works, it was built close to the iron furnaces, with tunnels connecting to the iron furnaces, and again close to the downtown where it could be on public view. So that was the sort of Victorian idea of success and wealth, that you would not take your money and hide it in the woods, you would put it out on Main Street and show it off. The state of the nation was such that materials were readily available. We still had some of the old growth forest. We had wood of a quality that cannot be purchased these days. We had a number of very highly skilled immigrant laborers coming to this country from Germany, from England, from Italy. People who knew how to cut and carve stone. The stone was readily available. Labor was still cheap. So I mean, you have the sort of the best of all worlds in that sense, in that you have the best quality of labor, you have the best materials available. And in those days, materials were more expensive than labor. So Scranton was at a position to take advantage of it. There was construction in almost every single block. Okay, so this was a boomtown. This was a good place to be. We were a growing, thriving city. Well, downtown started out somewhat as a sort of Main Street kind of town along Lackawanna Avenue, but then the growth was such that it clearly needed a plan. And with the construction of the courthouse, which was a planned development, the entire sort of focus of the downtown was moved to the east. That was actually a swamp that was filled in, and then the Board of Trade, which was the precursor to the Scranton Chamber of Commerce, built what is now the Scranton Electric Building, and that sort of set a new image and a new scale for Scranton. So Scranton has been built 3 or 4 times and is still rebuilding itself constantly. But that was when Scranton went from a 2 or 3 story sort of brick city to a 7, 8 story stone and steel frame city. Some architects work contextually, where they're sensitive to the environment, and other architects work in a sort of signature way, and they say, this is what I do, and the rest of the world is wrong. In the early part of the 20th century, even if the buildings were of disparate styles, there was a cohesiveness and a certain sense of scale, and there's an amazing harmony between those buildings, even though they are different styles. We have the courthouse, which is a Chateauesque Victorian, across from the post office, which is neoclassical, and they work very, very well together. Well, these are buildings that were built to last centuries. These are buildings not unlike the buildings of Europe that could literally endure 1,000 years if they're maintained. The preservation movement came to Scranton almost by default. And I think since I've been back here, I mean, the last 30 years, there's been a concerted effort. There's also been struggle. If you remember the mall, that was a huge preservation battle. And still, there are planners now, people who come into Scranton and say, you should never tear down one more building. You've lost too much. Do not tear down another single building in this city. However, the needs keep on changing. The scale of American life always seems to change, and these buildings do take a lot to maintain. I mean, I know that for example, the Radisson Hotel, that cornice, all that limestone cornice and all is, deteriorating badly. I mean, they will be looking at a major, major fix to replace and reset. Something not unlike what was recently done at the Metropolitan Museum in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. However, this is not New York City, and we don't have the kinds of means to reinvest in our structures in quite the same way. If you can see what's going on now at the Federal Post Office building, of course, that's the federal government. But they will, again, sort of restabilize and rebuild all of that facade over the next year and a half. Styles come and go. Things look, at certain points, look right, and then they look grotesque. And I mean, we certainly went through a period in the 60s and 70s where anything Victorian or anything ornate simply looked wrong. And to cover a sort of ornate historic architectural facade with a skin of aluminum and put a big sign on it, made it modern, made it look new and shiny. So I mean, I think that we've gone through that phase. Hopefully, I mean, I don't see that happening anymore. I mean, people are kind of unhappy when they uncover what has been hidden, or when you remove vinyl tile and find mosaic or marble or something, which happens here, or cheap paneling to find real paneling underneath. So I think those days are gone. But that was part of, modernism came with a vengeance. Modernism really, the theories for modernism come from Europe in the 1920s. And ornament and decoration and anything historic was seen as almost evil, almost morally wrong. And that carried through. There's a whole generation of architects, of people, I mean, that still see things that way. What's historic? I think the attitude now is what's historic is historic, what's modern should be modern. Things should be, I mean, truth is beauty, honesty is always should be part of that equation. But there's nothing wrong with, the honest expression of a Victorian building. It may not be your taste, but it's intact. It reflects the culture and the people and the economy of that time, and it's fair to respect it. I think there are some things about Scranton that are unique. I think that we have buildings of a scale and caliber that a community this size, current size, probably would not have. I mean, we have the bone structure to be a larger city. And we have some of the remnants and pieces that, when the founding fathers were building Scranton, the sky was the limit. And so we have buildings that are really for a city that may be, double or triple the size that we actually are. That makes us unique. I think we have a very good stock, largely because we did not go through some of the urban renewal or wholesale demolition that some other places went through. There are many more prosperous Northeast cities that Wilmington, Delaware, cities in Connecticut, places that had so much money that they tore down all of their historic fabric. And we did not have the money to do that in the 50s and the 60s. A city with a population of 75,000 today would be a suburb with a shopping mall. I mean, if you go out to in the South or in the Midwest or something, they don't have. I mean, we have a sense of a city. We have a grid, and we have streets, and we have buildings that touch each other and are juxtaposed to each other. We don't necessarily build cities that way anymore. And so that's what makes Scranton unique.